Welcome, restless dreamer. You've just stepped into the shadows of sleep, where stories whisper and the darkness listens. I'm your guide tonight, your voice in the void, here to lead you gently into nightmares wrapped in lullabies. Before we begin, press like if you're brave enough, and subscribe for more midnight tales that blur the line between sleep and terror. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what hour has found you? The Lotus Lantern guest house perched like an aging crane above a sleepy Thai hillside town. Its wood creaked with age, its red lanterns swayed lazily in the breeze, and the carved dragons on its balustrades were chipped and moss-covered. Elise could smell damp teakwood and something faintly metallic as she and Somchai stepped into the lobby, a smell that clung to old places that had seen too much life pass through and not enough renovation. "It's not a five-star hotel," Somchai said, placing her duffel down with a grin. "But it's safe, quiet, good for resting." Elise, jet-lagged and sweat-slick from a long day of interviews and bus rides, nodded. Safe and quiet sounds good. Their room was on the third floor, room 308. The fan was broken. The window opened to a view of dense banana trees and crooked rooftops. The mattress was firm and dented in the center, but Elise had stayed in worse. She dumped her gear and booted up her laptop, eager to sort through the shots from the village monastic school earlier that morning. By nightfall, the guest house had gone still. A single staff member manned the front desk downstairs, flipping through a dog-eared crime novel. A few European backpackers laughed over beers in the courtyard. And above Elise, room 409, the top suite, remained dark. That room had caught her attention when she checked in. The clerk had glanced up when she asked about it. 409, closed, water damage. But when she and Somchai had walked past it on the stairwell, Elise had noticed no signs of repairs. The wooden door looked perfectly fine. No caution tape, no buckets or tools, just a brass plate reading 409 and a heavy, antique keyhole. That night, Somchai fell asleep quickly, earplugs in, mouth slightly open. Elise stayed up, editing. The fan they borrowed from the front desk hummed steadily. She adjusted curves and contrast levels in Lightroom, her eyes burning from the screen. Then, at exactly 11:43 p.m., she heard it. A thump directly above her. Then a dragging sound, like furniture scraping across old wood. She paused the music in her headphones and listened. Another drag, then a woman's sob. Low, tired, desperate. Elise blinked, looked at Somchai, who hadn't stirred. Her heartbeat quickened. She heard a loud crash above, like glass shattering, and then the sound of something slamming against a wall. She stood and walked to the window. Above them was the rooftop, the fourth floor, where room 409 was supposedly closed. More sobbing, more banging. She moved to the door, cracked it open, and stepped into the hallway. The dim light bulbs buzzed faintly. Everything smelled like mildew and old varnish. She stared up the stairwell. The landing to the fourth floor was barely lit. Then came a voice, a male voice, low, firm, speaking fast in a language she couldn't place. Then another crash, then a wet, choking noise. Elise backed into her room. "Somchai," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He groaned, pulled out one earplug. "What?" "There's something happening upstairs," she said. "I think someone's hurt." He rubbed his face and sat up. "Probably nothing. Staff told me that room's closed. Nobody is up there." "Then who's dragging furniture and crying?" He stared at her for a moment, then slowly rose. "This place is full of old sounds. Pipes, wood, stories too. Locals think the place is haunted." She frowned. "I'm not hearing ghosts." He didn't argue, just lay back down and replaced his earplug. Elise stood frozen by the door, caught between instincts, one screaming to intervene, the other clinging to logic. Maybe someone snuck in. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe it wasn't her problem. She returned to her laptop, but couldn't focus. The noises faded around midnight. The crying stopped, the banging ceased, and the silence that followed was colder than the sounds themselves. The next morning, the guest house woke to chaos. Elise emerged from her room to find the hallway flooded with voices. Two police officers stood at the top of the stairwell. One held a clipboard. The other was listening to the desk clerk, who looked pale and frightened. Room 409's door was open. An officer ducked beneath yellow tape and stepped inside. Moments later, a uniformed paramedic came out, shaking his head. Empty stretcher. No survivors. Somchai joined Elise in the hall. They found someone, he whispered. A woman, tourist, dead. Her breath caught. Last night. It was her. I heard her. Did you see anyone? No. Just, I heard her crying. Something heavy dragging. Somchai looked down. We didn't do anything. A detective in a wrinkled white shirt soon knocked on their door. He was in his 40s, with a trimmed mustache and sun-wrinkled eyes. You are guests in room 308? He asked in measured English. Yes, Elise said. You hear anything last night? She hesitated. Somchai glanced at her but said nothing. I heard noises, she admitted. A woman crying, things breaking, a man speaking in another language. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. The detective nodded without expression. She was strangled, found in the bathroom. The room was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. Elise felt her stomach drop. She checked in alone, the detective added. Solo traveler. Nobody knows how someone else got in, or how they got out. They said the room was under renovation, she said quietly. Yes, but someone bypassed the registry. We believe she used a booking app. The owner didn't know she was there. Cameras on this floor. Broken. The detective took their passport details and told them not to leave the district. Word spread fast. Backpackers whispered in the stairwells. Some packed their bags in silence. A Swedish couple left before lunch. By mid-afternoon, only a handful of guests remained. Elise tried to work, tried to focus on her assignment, but the memory of the woman's choked sobs kept playing on loop in her head. That night, they were moved to a room on the second floor. Elise didn't sleep. At 12:02 a.m., the ceiling creaked, softly, repeatedly, like footsteps. She sat up. The guest house was nearly empty now. The rooftop should be abandoned. Then came a new sound. Tapping. A slow, deliberate tap, 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 directly above her bed. She stood and stepped to the center of the room. The tapping followed. Above her head. The temperature in the room seemed to dip, the fan now clicking irregularly. She stepped back. The tapping stopped. She didn't wake Somchai. She just sat in bed, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the ceiling until dawn. 2 days later, the police returned her passport. The woman who died was named Min Li. She was 27, traveling from Guangzhou. She had posted photos of herself at the night market just hours before her death. Her final story on social media was captioned, "Room has vintage vibes, cute balcony." No suspects were named, no arrests were made. The case made it to the front page of a local tabloid, then vanished. Elise and Somchai finished their assignment, wrapped up interviews, and boarded a red-eye flight back to London. Neither spoke of the woman in room 409. They moved through customs and baggage claims like sleepwalkers. Weeks later, Elise returned to editing. When she opened the audio from her footage that night, her hands trembled. Her laptop had recorded faint background noise through the built-in mic. Among the ambient clicks and distant fan whirs, she heard it. Crying, thumping, a man's voice, then a whispered word, possibly her name. She scrubbed back, played it again, slower. It wasn't her name. It was just breathing. Desperate, close. And then, a gurgle, a sound she would never forget. She closed the laptop and never opened that folder again. It's been 3 years now. Elise refuses to stay above the 3rd floor in any building. Hotels give her migraines. Hostels make her sick to her stomach. Sometimes, when she turns off her lights at night, she hears it again, dragging, weeping, a wet, broken sound, like someone choking on air. But when she turns on the lights, nothing, nothing at all. Just the faint echo of room 409 and the silence that followed. Maya Taylor had never stayed in a town so quiet it felt like it had a bedtime. Barrows Hollow, Maine, was all crooked chimneys and antique shops, perched on the edge of a forest that looked like it hadn't changed in 100 years. She'd come here after a humiliating breakup, and even more humiliating headlines online. One of her followers had leaked screenshots from a private breakup call. Her audience had turned on her. She needed silence. She needed space. She needed a place no one would recognize her. That's when she found Ashcroft Inn. It had popped up on a last-minute travel deal site. Newly reopened, colonial-era charm, designer linens, half the price of anything else in the area. And strangely, no reviews newer than 2 weeks old. Perfect. The building itself looked like it belonged in a Gothic novel. Stone pillars, faded blue shutters, and 3 gables that loomed like watchful eyes over the sloped yard. The sign creaked as her Uber pulled away, leaving her alone on the gravel path with just the sound of birds and breeze. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air smelled like lavender polish and ironed linen, polished wood, velvet furniture, everything just slightly too quiet. The woman at the front desk wore a pressed gray uniform and an unnaturally wide smile. "Welcome, Ms. Taylor. You'll be in room 203, one of our best, freshly renovated." There was something odd in the phrasing, not nicest, not most comfortable, just freshly renovated. Maya offered a tired smile, took her old-fashioned key, not a card, and climbed the creaky stairs to the second floor. Room 203 was prettier than she expected. Soft white walls, modern lighting, and floor-length curtains that blocked out the view of the empty woods. The bed looked untouched. A vase of fresh lilac sat by the window, but it was the closet that caught her eye. Tall, deep, with heavy wooden doors. Inside was a row of perfectly aligned hangers and built-in drawers that smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs. She unpacked quickly, not thinking much of it. Rolled t-shirts, folded jeans, a toiletry bag that she tossed onto the dresser. She'd traveled enough to keep it simple. Then, still buzzing from caffeine and exhaustion, she lay down on the bed with her laptop and started drafting her first private blog post in weeks. Hiding is underrated. That night, she dreamed she was back in the closet, but she wasn't alone. A cold hand reached for her collar, a voice whispered in her ear, "Sloppy. Try again." She woke up sweating, the bedsheet wrapped around her neck like a noose. Laughing nervously to herself, she kicked off the sheet and sat up. That's when she noticed something strange. Her suitcase was closed. She hadn't zipped it. Not only that, but when she opened it, everything was different. Her jeans were now stacked by color. Her t-shirts were folded vertically, KonMari style. Her underwear was folded into tiny triangles, perfectly uniform. Even the small pocket where she shoved receipts and loose change had been neatly emptied and arranged. A lone, sticky note sat on top of her socks, handwritten in black ink. Better. Maya took a full 2 minutes just staring at the note. Then she laughed. Someone was messing with her. Had to be. Housekeeping? But she'd left the "Do Not Disturb" sign up. She checked the door. Locked. The deadbolt was turned. The secondary chain latch was still hooked. Her phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Check-in with therapist, canceled. She snorted. Yeah, clearly canceled. Still unsettled, Maya snapped a few pictures of her suitcase layout this time, zipped it closed again, and shoved it back into the closet. She didn't sleep well. The next morning, she brought it up casually with the front desk. "Oh, our staff doesn't enter unless you request cleaning," the receptionist said, smiling too brightly again. "We respect our guests' privacy." "Very much." There was a cold emphasis on the last 2 words. "Okay," Maya said slowly. "It's just, something was moved in my room." The woman's smile faltered for a second. "Room 203, you said?" She tapped her nails on the counter. "That room was deep cleaned recently. Perhaps something was left behind from the renovation. We can move you if you'd prefer." "No," Maya said, not quite sure why. "It's fine," but it didn't feel fine. The second night, Maya placed deliberate traps. She laid her socks in a zigzag, her hoodie half hung on a hanger, her toiletries in a chaotic pile by the sink. She even put her phone on a charger near the closet and left its camera recording. Then she went downstairs to eat, leaving the room alone for 90 minutes. When she returned, everything was rearranged again. This time, to a degree that felt almost surgical. Her shampoo bottles stood in height order. Her zigzag socks were folded into a symmetrical stack and taped to the mirror in the same black ink handwriting. "Mess is a reflection of mind. You can't hide from disorder." She grabbed her phone. The video had stopped after 12 minutes. File corrupted, unplayable. Something or someone was watching, controlling, correcting. The next day, she visited the local library. Barrows Hollow didn't have much in terms of a digital archive, but the town librarian, a kind woman in her 60s, lit up when Maya asked about Ashcroft Inn. Originally a finishing school for girls, back in the 1890s. Eliza Crown ran it, known for strict discipline. There were incidents. What kind of incidents? The librarian hesitated. One of the girls died, locked in a closet overnight. Claimed she couldn't meet Miss Crown's standards. Maya's blood ran cold. Did they shut it down? Not immediately, but enrollment dropped. Miss Crown eventually disappeared. Some say she stayed in the building hiding. Others, that she died there. It sat empty for decades. When Maya mentioned room 203, the librarian flinched. They renamed the rooms. That was once the dormitory hall. If it's the second-floor corner unit, that was Miss Crown's personal quarters. That night, Maya packed her bag. She was done. Job or no job, therapy or no therapy, she wasn't staying another night. But the moment she zipped her suitcase, the lights flickered. A slow creak came from the closet. Her phone rang. No name, just static. Then a voice, soft, feminine, stern. "I see you learn nothing." She turned toward the closet. The doors were now open. Inside, her suitcase sat empty. Her clothes were hanging neatly, precisely. Shirts ironed, underwear folded, scarves tied into bows. And in the center, a dress she didn't own. Dark gray, Victorian style, with a high collar and buttons down the front. Pinned to it, in the same black script, "Try again." Maya didn't remember walking backward, but when her legs hit the bed, she nearly collapsed. The room was cold now. Not air conditioning cold, but empty house in January cold. She grabbed her phone to call the front desk, but it was frozen. The screen dimmed to black, flickered, and died in her hand. All she could hear was the faint ticking of the antique clock on the nightstand. Tick, 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 and something else. The sound of fabric shifting, not hers, from the closet. Slow, methodical, as if someone were admiring the work, smoothing it, adjusting the hangers, refolding until it was perfect. She reached for the lamp beside the bed and yanked the cord from the wall. A weapon. She wasn't staying in the room one more second. Just as she reached the door, click, the deadbolt slid back into place, locked. She tried the old-fashioned key. It spun in the lock but did nothing. The latch wouldn't budge. "Let me out," she whispered. "Please." The lights dimmed to a dull amber. Shadows thickened in the corners. The scent of lavender was now so strong it burned her nose. A creak behind her. The closet door had swung fully open now. Inside, the gray Victorian dress hung front and center, and beneath it, a figure, not whole, not fully visible, just the outline of something tall and bony, its hands rearranging hangers, and then it turned toward her. No face, just the shimmering blur of a woman's head and a sharp, tutting sound. Tsk, tsk. Maya screamed and hurled the lamp, but it passed straight through the closet's interior and slammed against the wall, shattering. She sprinted to the window, pulled at the sash and shoved with all her strength. Painted shut. Behind her the air seemed to pulse. "Presentation matters," the voice said, now clearly in the room. It was in her ears, in her spine, in the walls. "If you cannot manage yourself, I will." She backed into the bathroom, heart hammering, chest tight, locked the door and flicked on the light. She stared at herself in the mirror and blinked. Her reflection wasn't matching her movements. Maya lifted her hand to touch her face. The version in the mirror was already waiting for it, a half-second ahead, as if it had expected her. Her eyes, in the mirror, were narrowed, judgmental. Then they rolled upward, not out of fear, but disdain. A single word formed in the fog on the mirror. Disgraceful. The bulb above her head shattered. The mirror cracked through the middle. The journal was waiting for her when she emerged from the bathroom, sitting on the bed, leather-bound, aged, warped from time. It hadn't been there before. Inside, pages and pages of tiny, meticulous writing, diagrams of dresser drawers, instructions on how to fold socks, even a schedule for brushing hair. Then came the final page. Room 203 Guests Log. Maya's name was written in fresh black ink. Under it, 3 options. Failed to comply, showed improvement, needs correction. The third one was circled. Maya stared down at her name, shaking. "This isn't real," she whispered. "This isn't." The closet door slammed shut behind her. She screamed. A wind picked up in the room, though no windows were open. Curtains fluttered. The journal flipped shut. Drawers opened and slammed. Lights buzzed and flickered. Something invisible began pulling on her clothes, straightening them, tugging her sleeves, tightening her hoodie strings until she choked. Maya thrashed free, fell to the floor, and crawled toward the door again. She clawed at the lock. The closet opened one last time. A figure stepped out, no longer translucent. Eliza Crown, tall and severe, with iron gray hair, a high-necked dress, and eyes like cracks in glass. Her face held no anger, just disappointment. She moved without footsteps. Behind her, the walls of the closet twisted into something unnatural. Shelves, hangers, boxes, all arranged in rows as though the space was no longer a closet but a whole room of storage, of people's lives, categorized and folded. Maya screamed, but her voice felt muffled, pressed flat, like it had been ironed out. Eliza raised a single bony hand. "You are not ready for the outside world. Not yet. Not until you learn order." Maya woke in a hospital bed, bright white ceiling tiles, IV in her arm, her throat raw, a nurse adjusting monitors. "What happened?" she whispered. "You were found unconscious in your hotel room," the nurse said gently. "You're safe now." Safe. But she didn't feel it. She turned to the table beside her and saw her bag had been brought in. Unzipped. Inside, her clothes, folded with mathematical precision. Socks by Hugh, tags removed, everything. Perfect. And on top of the stack, a small note card. Much better. Maya moved to a new apartment. Minimalist. Clean. No closets with doors. Just open shelving. She stopped traveling. Stopped vlogging. When friends asked why, she said she needed to simplify her life. What she didn't say, what she couldn't say, was that sometimes, in the middle of the night, she still heard hangers clinking together, that she had to fight the urge to refold everything in her drawers at 3 a.m., that if she didn't keep everything just right, she started to feel a pressure behind her eyes, like someone was watching, judging, correcting. The sea air in Hoi An always smelled like wet paint and rotting driftwood. Mara hated that. She had expected rustic beauty and charm, but the Luke Bin Inn, her home for the next 10 days, was anything but. The 3-story colonial relic stood crooked at the edge of the beach like an arthritic finger pointing into the fog. Mara adjusted the strap of her camera and stepped into the lobby. The desk clerk, a too smiley man with yellowing fingernails, handed her an old-fashioned brass key. "Second floor. Please keep windows shut. Restoration work upstairs. Paint fumes, yes?" "Sure," she muttered. The hallway to her room was lined with faded murals of lotus flowers, all peeling and stained with water damage. She unlocked room 204. The air inside was thick with turpentine. The window had been sealed shut with masking tape. A thin line of gray dust hugged the edges of the floor. No TV, just a desk, bed, and standing fan. Charming. That night, at 12:23 a.m., Mara was woken by a high-pitched whine. A generator, maybe. She got out of bed and padded to the door. Opening it just a crack, she saw figures in gray coveralls moving silently up the stairwell to the 3rd floor. One of them turned toward her just as she closed the door. The whine intensified. The next morning, the front desk clerk acted as if everything were normal. "Your breakfast, miss. Rice soup? Banana, yes?" Mara squinted. "Was there a power outage last night?" Weird noises. The man's smile didn't change. "Just paint machines. Upstairs is being restored. Please keep windows shut." Later that day, she met Julian, a travel vlogger from the Netherlands. He was staying in room 210. Over beers at a corner cafe, he laughed off the fumes. "They told me the same thing. The whole place smells like a glue factory." "You saw the crew too?" He raised an eyebrow. "No." "What crew?" That night, Mara was again woken past midnight. This time the sound was lower, a pulse, like distant thunder. She opened her door and immediately gagged. The hallway reeked of ammonia and something metallic. Her eyes stung. Someone coughed violently nearby. It was Julian, stumbling barefoot in boxers, his nose bleeding. "Mara," he croaked. "Help!" He collapsed. Mara ran to the front desk. The clerk was gone. The lights flickered. She fumbled for her phone. No signal. Behind her, the stairwell creaked. Footsteps. Calm, even. Not in a hurry. She grabbed a hotel brochure and fanned the fumes away, guiding Julian back to his room. By morning, he was gone. The sheets were stripped. No blood. No smell. A new lock on the door. The front desk clerk looked up with the same yellow-nailed smile. "Your friend check out early. Said he'd feel better. He didn't even have his shoes on. The man only shrugged. He say no want to disturb. We handle luggage. She left. She needed Wi-Fi, witnesses, anyone. In the old town, Mara met Lei, a young woman who ran a riverside bookstore. Over iced coffee, Mara explained everything. Julian's collapse, the strange noises, the disappearing guests. Le frowned. They still using that hotel? I thought it shut down after the storm. What storm? Lei leaned closer. 3 years ago, a tourist died there. Some kind of chemical leak. Her skin turned gray. Locals say it was a gas test. Military stuff. The hotel paid off the report. Said she had a heart defect. Mara felt her stomach twist. That night she set up her DSLR to film outside her door. Midnight came. The wine returned. Gray-suited figures appeared, dragging something down the hallway in a sheet. She didn't sleep. The footage was grainy but damning. A human-sized bundle. No attempt to hide it. Just blank masks and heavy boots. Mara uploaded the video to her cloud. She tried sending it to a few journalists. Email failed. Her laptop froze. Her phone blinked with a message. Upload incomplete. Then came the knock. Soft. Deliberate. She held her breath. A whisper through the wood. Miss Mara, we need to inspect your window. She backed away. Another whisper. A different voice this time. It's for your safety. The next morning, she found all her files gone. Camera wiped, laptop reloaded. Even her notepad was missing from her bag. She checked out. The taxi driver was quiet until they reached the airport. As he unloaded her bags, he murmured, "You're lucky." She turned. Why? They only restore 2 floors at a time. 6 weeks later in Boston, Mara received an email from an unknown address. Subject, Room 304. No message, just an attachment. She clicked it. A single frame from her missing footage. The hallway. The bundle. A gloved hand. She zoomed in. A bracelet on the wrist sticking out of the sheet. Julian's leather strap with the tiny wooden clogs. That night, the fire alarm in her apartment went off at 12:23 a.m. She rushed into the hallway. The walls were clean, freshly painted. Evan Griggs had taken detours before. That's how he found the crumbling train station in Nebraska and the fog-drenched cemetery in Oregon, both of which landed him cover shots on Rustline, a niche photojournalist magazine that paid well when it cared to. This time he was winding through the Blue Ridge Mountains, chasing autumn. The trees were gold and fire red, and his gas tank was at a quarter. His GPS dropped out 20 minutes ago. At a break in the trees, he saw a wooden sign barely visible beneath the brush. Brookshade Cabins. Vacancy. He turned in without thinking. The gravel drive was narrow and coiled uphill, lined by trees leaning in like they had secrets. At the top, 6 cabins sat in a crescent around a clearing. A rustic lodge stood at the center, lights glowing amber behind thick glass. A woman stepped out before he even reached the office door. She wore a thick sweater, had silver hair tied into a low braid, and greeted him like she'd been waiting. "You'll want cabin 9, she said, without asking his name. Evan blinked. "How'd you know I was—" "We don't get many travelers this time of year. You'll like it. Quiet. Nearest cell tower's about 30 miles off. Perfect if you're trying to unplug." He didn't correct her. Inside, the desk was made from thick oak, polished until it gleamed. Everything smelled like cedar and old books. "No ID?" he asked. She smiled faintly and handed him a key. Not a card. A real key. Brass. Heavy. Just don't lose it. Cabin 9 was at the far end where the trees grew thickest. It looked smaller than the others. No porch light. A rocking chair sat motionless near the front door, half draped in dry leaves. Inside it was rustic but clean. Worn quilt on the bed. Fireplace prepped with kindling. The bathroom sink dripped slowly but rhythmically. Evan unpacked, checked the outlets, and set up his camera gear. He placed one camera on a tripod aimed toward the window and another above the bed for a night lapse. Both had motion sensors. He was asleep by 10:30. He woke just after 2 a.m. The room was cold, far colder than the thermostat allowed. He sat up, blinking blearily, and saw the rocking chair. It was moving, just slightly, back and forth, back and forth. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The air was still, not a breeze in sight. The trees didn't even rustle. Yet the chair creaked, slow and steady. He stopped it with his hand. It didn't move again. Back inside, he checked the camera on his nightstand. Its red light was blinking. Motion detected. 3 clips. He scrolled through them. Clip 1, Evan shifting in bed. Clip 2, a faint click, like the sound of the key turning in the front door. Clip 3, a single frame. Someone, or something, standing in the corner of the room, just beyond the bed frame. The figure was tall, pale, blurred, featureless. The next frame, it was gone. In the morning, a mug of black coffee sat on his porch table. He hadn't made it. He drank it anyway. The lodge was empty except for the old woman, who was now making tea at the fireplace. Evan hesitated before asking, "Has anything weird happened in cabin 9 before?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, "We used to call that one the end cabin. People used to like it for the privacy." He waited. She didn't elaborate. Evan sighed. "I got a weird clip on my camera last night. Thought maybe it was a trick of the light." Now she looked up. Her expression was unreadable. "You're not the first to say that. Who was the last?" She turned back to the fire. "Photographer. Backpacker type. Booked 3 nights. Never checked out. Left all his things behind. No note. No ID. Just gone." Evan felt the coffee turn bitter in his throat. "What happened to his stuff?" "We packed it away," she said. "But the police said he probably left on foot. Never came back for the key, though." That night, Evan locked the cabin. Deadbolt. Chain. He even wedged a chair under the door handle. He turned in early, but the wind kept him up. Or at least, he thought it was the wind, until it started walking. Not blowing, not rustling. Walking. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, across the porch. Then a scrape as the chair moved from the door. The lock clicked. He froze. He grabbed his phone, turned on the camera app, and pressed record. But the screen flickered. Signal lost. He didn't move for what felt like hours. Just waited. But the door never opened. The footsteps never came inside. By morning, the rocking chair was facing the door again, and on the porch table sat 2 mugs. One black, one still warm. Evan spent the day trying to convince himself it was all in his head. He hiked into town, 3 miles down a dusty road, looking for distractions. He stopped at a diner and asked about Brookshade Cabins. The waitress stiffened. "Still open?" "Yeah, I'm staying there." "You in the last cabin?" His stomach sank. "Yeah." She leaned closer. "Someone disappeared there a few years back. Hiker from Michigan. Cops said he wandered off, but what?" She looked around. He showed up in a photo. 2 years later. Tourist posted a picture of the woods near Brookshade. Behind the trees, they caught him, the missing guy, standing in the shadows. Same clothes, same hat. Just there, staring at the camera. Evan didn't finish his coffee. Night 3. Evan didn't sleep. Instead, he kept all the lights on and sat on the bed, watching both cameras live through his laptop. At 1:48 a.m., one of the monitors glitched. Cabin feed lost. When it returned, the chair had moved again. This time, into the center of the room. Then the motion detector chimed. Behind him. He turned just in time to see the bedroom door creak open, even though he'd locked it tight. The hallway beyond was dark. A figure stood at the end, not fully visible, just the silhouette of a man with long limbs, head tilted like he was studying Evan. Then the figure stepped forward, but there was no sound, no footsteps, no breathing. Evan backed into the corner, heart jackhammering, voice caught in his throat. Then, just as suddenly, the lights blew out. Darkness swallowed the cabin. Morning came, bright, too bright. Evan woke slumped in the corner, still clutching his phone. His mouth tasted like dust. His throat was raw. The cabin was empty. The chair sat where it always did. He stumbled to the desk, checked the footage. The camera above the bed had gone black at 2:03 a.m. But the window camera, the one pointed outside, it was still running, and it had caught something. Frame by frame, he watched. 2 a.m., porch empty. 2:01, a shadow crosses the window. 2:02, the front door creaks open from the outside. 2:03, a hand, pale, long-fingered, reaches toward the knob and disappears. Then, a face appears, just behind the glass. Not angry, not monstrous, curious, like it was trying to remember him. He didn't even pack. He ran. Didn't stop to say goodbye. Didn't stop to leave the key. He drove down the mountain with shaking hands, ignoring the branches that scratched at his windshield and the cold that clawed its way through the vents. Only once did he look back, and on the porch of cabin 9, the rocking chair moved, back and forth, back and forth. 3 weeks later, Evan developed the film from his first night at Brookshade, mostly trees, cabin angles, a few wide shots of the mountains. Then one frame stopped him cold. A photo he didn't remember taking, the porch of cabin 9, nighttime, and in the chair, a man sitting, pale, thin, mouth slightly open like he was whispering. Evan didn't recognize the man until he looked closer, until he saw the camera bag, his camera bag, the one that had gone missing that second night. Brookshade Cabins is still open, still cheap, still advertising, disconnect from distractions. Cabin 9 isn't listed on their website, but if you ask, really ask, they'll say it's available. And if you stay, be sure to check your photos when you leave. Sometimes the guest before you isn't ready to let go. Paige Ellison needed to unplug. After 4 straight months of deadline hell and digital overload, she booked herself into a place that promised peace and silence. North Hollow Retreat sat tucked inside a mossy Oregon forest, accessible only by a single winding gravel road. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, no televisions. The website practically whispered, disconnect to reconnect. Her cabin, room 6B, was one of 10 spaced along a tree-lined path. The structure was rustic, made of old timber and river rock, but well kept. Inside was a small bed, a writing desk, and a wood-burning stove. No mirror, no electronics, just a handwritten welcome note and a lantern with real oil. Perfect. The first day passed like a dream. Paige hiked a nearby trail, sketched the landscape, and fell asleep with no screen glowing beside her. But something shifted on the second night. She woke around 3 a.m., sweating beneath her blanket. The temperature had dropped, her breath fogged in the air, but the wood stove had gone cold. Odd. She remembered feeding it before bed. As she reached for her flashlight, she noticed something else. The closet door was ajar. She was sure she had closed it. She slowly got up and walked to it. Empty. Just the extra blanket and a spare coat. Still, a cold prickle danced across her back. She shut the door tightly. Day 3. Paige reported the stove issue to the front desk in the main lodge. A woman in her 60s with cloud-gray hair smiled politely. Ah, that happens sometimes. Flue gets sticky in 6B. I'll send someone to fix it. That night the stove stayed cold again. But what disturbed Paige more wasn't the cold. It was the feeling of being watched. She couldn't explain it, just the nagging sense that eyes were on her as she moved around. She closed the curtains tight, though she hadn't seen anyone outside. She told herself it was just the unfamiliar silence playing tricks on her. At 2:18 a.m., she awoke to a faint scratching sound. It came from the far corner, just above the closet. A steady scrape, like fingernails lightly brushing wood. She sat frozen in bed, eyes wide, heart thudding. It stopped after maybe a minute, and she somehow drifted back to sleep. Day 4. She noticed her toiletries had been shifted. The toothbrush lay sideways instead of upright in the cup. Her journal, which she kept closed, had its ribbon marker on the wrong page. Her sketchbook had a faint fingerprint smudge on a drawing she hadn't even touched since the first day. Had staff been inside? When she asked at the lodge, the gray-haired woman gave her the same serene smile. Housekeeping's only done on checkout, dear. Paige didn't like the way she said it, like she already knew no one was supposed to enter, and knew someone had. That night, Paige didn't sleep. She turned the lantern down low and waited. Hours passed. At 3:09 a.m., the closet creaked open. Very slowly. She sat up, held her breath. Nothing emerged. Just darkness. But this time, Paige got up and walked to it. She reached for the door and noticed something. A faint breeze. From inside the closet. She pulled aside the hanging coat and blanket. Her fingers found an uneven wooden panel at the back. With a sharp tug, it popped loose. Behind it, a narrow tunnel. And in the tunnel, wires. Dusty, faintly glowing. Paige fetched her flashlight. The crawlspace led to a low hallway running behind the row of cabins. It smelled of mildew and earth. Pipes lined the walls, and decades-old cables snaked along the floor. She followed it for about 10 yards until she came upon a metal door, its hinges rusted but not locked. Inside was a small, windowless monitor room. The screens were grainy, low resolution, like ancient security cams. Most were dark, but a few still flickered with dull, greenish footage. Cabin 2B, Cabin 4A, Cabin 6B. Paige stared at the screen marked 6B. She saw herself. From the corner. From above the closet. A static-filled feed showed her cabin in real time, including the bed, where, just hours earlier, she had been lying. Her chest tightened. She looked at the wall. Dozens of old VHS tapes, labeled with cabin numbers and dates going back decades. How long had this been running? Who had watched all these people? And were they still watching now? She heard a noise from the hallway. Footsteps. Paige killed her flashlight. The crawl space behind her lit up faintly from another lantern, and someone's shadow stretched long across the wall. She ducked behind the monitors and held her breath as the shadow paused just outside the door. The person didn't come in. Instead, she heard the soft click of a panel being shut. Back in her room, they'd noticed the crawl space was open. Whoever they were, they knew. And now, she knew too. Paige didn't go back to 6B. She waited in the monitor room for hours, trembling. When daylight finally broke, she crawled out of the tunnel and fled straight through the forest toward the highway. No bag, no phone, no gear. She flagged down a passing utility truck and begged for help. By the time police arrived at North Hollow Retreat, the cabins were empty. No staff, no guests. The front lodge had been abandoned, though the building was warm and recently used. The crawl space, sealed shut. When they broke it open, the room with monitors was gone, cleared out like it had never existed. 2 weeks later, Paige sat in her apartment in Seattle, staring at her ceiling, trying to sleep. She hadn't told anyone the full story. The police didn't believe there had been any criminal activity. No record of the retreat's owners. The business had been paid in cash. No contract. No trace left. But Paige knew what she saw, what she felt. She installed blackout curtains, soundproof foam, a dozen deadbolts, and still, some nights she would wake at 3:09 a.m., her heart racing, certain she heard it again. Scratch, scratch, from just behind her closet. She told herself it was nothing, but she never opened the door, and the light above her bed always stayed on. Maya Ruiz had traveled alone countless times before. A tech recruiter from Austin, she'd become used to small towns, late check-ins, and motels with vending machines for breakfast. But the Bellbrook Inn felt different. Nestled deep in the pine-covered hills of North Carolina, the Lakeside Lodge had been a last-minute booking. Her usual chain hotel near Asheville was full due to a fall festival, so she picked Bellbrook for its charm and convenience. And because the online reviews all praised its tranquil privacy and no digital footprint. In her line of work, that sounded perfect. The gravel crunched under her rental's tires as she pulled up to the parking lot. The lodge sat low and wide like an aging animal resting by the lake. Its wood-paneled walls weathered but clean. Overgrown hydrangeas clustered near the office entrance, and warm light glowed from behind lace curtains. A brass bell jingled as she stepped inside. An older man with neat white hair and thick glasses looked up from behind a worn wooden desk. "You must be Ms. Ruiz," he said. "Suite 12, right?" "Yes, that's me, Maya. You'll like that room," he smiled. "It's got the best lake view." He slid a real metal key across the counter. No key cards, no ID scan. Just her name in a guest book, like something from the 1950s. It was oddly comforting. Her suite was on the far end, the last door in a row of 10, tucked under a canopy of cedar trees. The exterior light flickered slightly as she approached. Suite 12's porch had 2 rocking chairs and a view of the moonlit lake shimmering between the trees. Inside, the room was spacious, too spacious for a solo traveler. A large queen bed sat against the far wall, an antique writing desk opposite it. The decor was cozy, floral wallpaper, knit throw blankets, even a ceramic bowl of mints on the dresser. The only thing modern was the TV mounted above the fireplace, turned off and covered in a fine layer of dust. After a long drive and a full day of client interviews, Maya showered, changed into sweats, and sank into the armchair by the window with her laptop. No Wi-Fi, of course. The Bellbrook Inn prided itself on being completely disconnected. She didn't realize she'd dozed off until the sound woke her. Tap, tap, tap. It was rhythmic, metallic. At first, she thought it was just an animal outside. Then it came again. Tap, tap, Tap. This time, from the wall behind her. She turned around. The sound had come from the same side as the bed, the headboard pressed against what she assumed was the outer wall. But now that she looked closer, something felt off. There was no window on that wall, no seams, just solid paneling. She knocked lightly, hollow. The entire section felt like it had been built over. Maya frowned. Her recruiter instincts kicked in. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and scanned along the edge of the wall. A thin seam ran vertically where two panels met. At the baseboard, a faint scrape mark, as if something had been opened and closed repeatedly. A cold draft touched her ankles. She pulled the bed slightly away from the wall. That's when she noticed the outlet cover near the floor, misaligned and slightly ajar. When she touched it, it shifted. Behind it, a tiny black circle blinked red, like the eye of a machine pretending not to see. Her stomach dropped. A camera, hidden behind the wall, angled toward the bed. She stood there for a moment, unsure if she should cry or throw something. Then anger took over. She grabbed her phone and began snapping photos of the lens, the outlet, the scrape marks on the baseboard. She yanked the lamp off the nightstand and used its narrow base to pry against the panel. The wood gave way with a pop. Behind the panel was a 2-foot crawl space, and within it, more wires. A second lens mounted higher, and a small humming fan for ventilation. It wasn't a cheap setup. Someone had built this with precision. Maya backed away and opened the door, storming across the lot to the office. The lights inside were off, but she could see movement behind the curtains. She knocked. No answer. "Hello?" she called. More shuffling, then silence. She stepped back into the darkness. Her mind raced. Should she leave? Drive an hour back to Asheville? But her laptop was still in the room, her wallet too. Her instincts told her she had to know more. She needed proof. Back inside Suite 12, she searched again. Behind the bathroom mirror, nothing. Under the dresser, just dust and a dropped coin. Then she noticed the TV. The power cord wasn't plugged into the wall. It ran through a drilled hole into the paneling. She unplugged it and heard a soft whir cut out. The red light blinked once, then died. The screen flashed for a second before powering off completely. On it, for just a moment, she had seen her own reflection. Not live, but slightly delayed. It hadn't been a television. It was a monitor. She started shaking. That wasn't just a camera. It had a feed. She packed her bag in minutes, unplugging everything she could. Just as she opened the door, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Why did you move the bed?" Her throat went dry. She looked around. No one was outside. The only movement was the wind rustling through the trees. Then, a soft creak, wood under weight. She looked up. One of the cameras she'd disabled was moving, not remote-controlled. Someone was behind it. She ran, back across the gravel, into the woods behind the lodge. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Her phone screen glowed with more texts, each one more invasive. "Don't leave. We're still watching." Suite 12 was perfect. Maya stumbled down a slope, branches slapping her face, shoes slipping on wet leaves. She stopped only when she reached the edge of the lake. Moonlight shimmered on the surface. Across the water, she could see the outline of the Bellbrook Inn, a dark shape with scattered warm windows. And high above, on the roof, she saw a figure, standing motionless, watching her. It didn't move. It didn't speak, but she felt it smiling. She turned and sprinted along the shoreline, eventually coming to a gravel road. After 10 more minutes of running, she saw headlights, an old delivery van slowing down. She waved frantically, nearly collapsing as the van stopped, and the driver rolled down his window. "You okay, miss? Please, take me to the nearest town, please." The man didn't ask questions. He nodded and helped her in. Halfway down the road, he finally broke the silence. "You come from Bellbrook?" She nodded. "How did you know?" He tapped his dashboard. "You're not the first. They've been running something there for years. My cousin stayed once. Came home paranoid. Said the mirrors were alive." Maya looked down at her phone. It had no signal, but the camera app had reopened on its own, and the screen showed her face. Only, she wasn't holding it at the same angle. She wasn't even moving. It was playing her, live, from somewhere else. 1 month later, authorities raided Bellbrook Inn after Maya's report. They found a network of hidden crawl spaces and a data center disguised as a wine cellar. The entire building had been rigged with motion sensors, surveillance cameras, and automated recording equipment. No Wi-Fi. Everything ran on wired connections and physical backups. No arrest was made. The owner, Mr. Ellison, according to the ledger, had vanished days earlier. All the tapes, feeds, and hard drives were gone. Suite 12 is now boarded up. The rest of the lodge is under renovation. But sometimes, if you dig deep enough into anonymous forums or the dark web, a link will appear for a few minutes before vanishing. Live, lakefront suite, private, no Wi-Fi, and if you click it in time, you'll see her, Maya, sitting in the rocking chair on the porch of Suite 12, watching, waiting, as if someone else is holding the camera now. I took the night shift at the Briarwood Apartments out of desperation more than anything else. The building was old, worn down, and the kind of place where you kept your head low and your mouth shut. But it paid better than most jobs in the area, and after 3 months of unemployment, I couldn't afford to be picky. My name is Ava Lambert, 29, recently laid off from a downtown call center that shuttered overnight. I had no family nearby, no support system, just a tiny studio apartment and a resume full of customer service roles. When I got the job at Briarwood, the landlord, Mr. Caro, made the rules clear. No guests, don't leave the front desk unattended, and never go above the 8th floor unless called. The 9th floor is sealed off anyway, he said, handing me a set of keys. Under renovation, you won't have to worry about it. But that was a lie. On my second week, a call came in just after midnight. Static heavy. A woman's voice, barely audible. Help me. Suite 9C. I froze. I hadn't even known the 9th floor had numbered suites. There was no 9C on any of the paperwork I was given. I pressed the intercom button. Who is this? Silence. I climbed the stairwell, my flashlight barely pushing back the gloom. The elevator didn't even go up that high. The air grew cold as I reached the 9th floor landing. It was different. The walls were clean, the carpet newer. No cobwebs, no water damage. Not under renovation at all. I found Suite 9C at the end of the hall. The number plate was polished, and the doorknob gleamed like someone had just shined it. I knocked. Nothing. But I heard something inside. A low, rhythmic creaking, like a rocking chair moving back and forth. I leaned my ear to the door. Ava, someone whispered. I stumbled back. I hadn't told anyone my name. I ran downstairs. Mr. Caro wasn't answering his phone. I tried to forget it. Told myself it was a prank, a dream. But the next night, the call came again. Suite 9C. Help. He's still here. That's when I started digging. I broke into the maintenance room after hours. In the back of a filing cabinet, behind blueprints and water damage reports, I found a logbook. Not for plumbing or heating. This one documented tenant deaths. Most were unremarkable. Heart attacks, overdoses. But 7 deaths had one thing in common. Same unit. 9C. Over a span of 18 years. Always at night. Always ruled natural. I printed what I could, stuffed the papers in my backpack, and planned to quit. I even started drafting an anonymous tip to the police. But then I made a mistake. I confronted Mr. Caro. He didn't deny anything. Just stared at me with cold, unblinking eyes. You're not the first to go snooping. But maybe you'll be the first to understand. Suite 9C doesn't belong to me. I didn't understand. Some people rent it. Clients, you could say. They need privacy. Absolute privacy. And that suite offers it. What happens there, stays there. And no one asks questions. You're covering up murders. He didn't flinch. The ones who died? They weren't the ones paying for the room. They were the product. I left. Or tried to. But the moment I stepped outside, I saw a black sedan idling across the street. It was still there the next morning. Every time I walked to the corner store, it was parked on the next block. No plates. Then came the texts. You should forget about 9C. We see you. Go back. One last night. It's already waiting. I went to the police, showed them the printouts. They promised to investigate. 2 days later, the building was cleared. They found the suite exactly as I described it. But no surveillance, no evidence, no bodies. The files I had? Gone. My computer wiped. My phone reset. The officer assigned to my case? Transferred. No record of my report. And then the dream started. Always the same. I'm back in Suite 9C. The mirror fogged. The sound of water running. And someone humming an old lullaby. A man in the corner chair, face hidden in shadow, whispering my name. Last week I woke to find a room key on my pillow. Suite 9C. I haven't slept since. But I know one night soon, I'll be back there. And this time, I don't think I'll make it out. Some rooms should never be opened, and some secrets should never be found.